In this section, we are going to be talking about modules. So we've already talked about modules a fair bit earlier when we were discussing Node, and you've already seen examples of modules. We have JavaScript files. So let's go ahead and just take a step back and redefine what a module is at its core. Modules simply allow one JavaScript file to include another JavaScript file. And that's it. And it sounds pretty underwhelming, but trust me when I say that front-end module loading is absolutely essential for any modern web development. And the reason being is if you spent much time with JavaScript, I'm sure you're all too familiar with dependency management, where you have multiple JavaScript files that define library functions and all that fun stuff, and then you need to use those functions in another JavaScript file. So then the burden of figuring out which file to load goes to the HTML page, where you have to meticulously sort all of your script tags so things load in the proper order, and it's a mess and it's horrible, and you really shouldn't be doing that anymore in 2015. Now, the concept of loading modules in JavaScript, loading files from the browser, is not new. It's been around for many years. There's been many ways to load modules. There are many, or a handful rather, not many, but a handful of different formats that you can define modules in and all that fun stuff. So why talk about it now? Why start really bringing it up? Well, the answer to that is that modules, a module loading syntax, has been standardized in ES 2015. So finally, the JavaScript community has been doing modules for many years now. But finally, the TC39 people got around to standardizing it. So now we have a standardized syntax for defining modules. But that's just one half of the problem. Basically, for us to be able to take advantage of modules in JavaScript, we need two things. We first need a format or a syntax, and now there's an official syntax for defining modules. But the second thing is we need a runtime. Now, as of right now, in almost 2016, there is no widely available, or there's no standardized module loader for front-end web development. Now, that'll change in the future. Now, fortunately, all the stuff I'm going to be showing you guys in this series is pretty future-proof as far as using the transpiler to fill in missing features, but there's no standard module loader yet. There's something very close to the standard module loader, well, what will become the standard module loader called System.js, but we'll talk about that in a later video. So the question becomes, if we don't have a standardized runtime yet that we can just use, how do we enable the browser to load in modules? Well, like I said, the concept of modules has been around for a very long time, so we have a handful of choices that we can use, and we're going to be taking a look at all of the popular module loaders in the coming videos. So basically, in this video, I'm going to be talking about the module syntax, just the stuff you type in order, in ECMA 2015, in order to load, import or export code from other files. And then in the coming videos, what we're going to be talking about is how to use that syntax with different module loaders. And the module loaders we're going to be taking a look at, and most of these are a lot more than module loaders, so we'll be seeing that as well, is going to be Require.js, Browserify, Webpack, JSPM, and at the same time as JSPM, the System.js module loader polyfill. As far as which one to use, that's up to you. They all have their strengths and weaknesses. We will be talking about them as we go along. Now, the way I'm going to do this, in order to prevent as much repetition as possible, is in this video, and the first few videos, we're going to be putting together a sample JavaScript application that uses ES 2015 and uses ES 2015 modules. So we're going to get Babel and Gulp and Less, all that stuff we're going to get all set up. Then, for each module loader, we're going to start off in a different project and talk about how to use that module loader directly. And then after we're done with that, we will then come back to this example and plug that particular module loader into this example. And the reason I'm doing this is I don't want to repeat the sample application for every single module loader we're going to look at. So in this video, we're just going to look at syntax. We're just going to see how it works. And I encourage people to type along. I encourage people to get this project going so you have a nice little playground to work with while testing out the different module loaders you can use. So basically, we'll do this once, and then for each other one, we'll copy and paste this project. So I guess let's just go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and make dir 00 example, starting off on 0 this time. And I'm going to go ahead and open up code. So I just have an empty directory right here. Now, while code pops up on a random monitor, I'm going to go ahead and type in npm init. So we're definitely going to need that, of course. Then I'm going to go ahead and grab our modules. So you should be familiar with all the modules we're about to load. So I'm going to npm install gulp. Well, I'm going to do gulp.js/gulp #40. Of course, future people might not need to do that, depending on if gulp 4 has been released yet to npm. I'm also going to load or grab gulp load plugins, gulp less, gulp babel. And let's go ahead and grab our Babel. Oops, that's not how you do that. Babel preset ES 2015. So go ahead and oops, nope, don't do that, because make sure you do save dev. Especially since we're using gulp load plugins, make sure that all the gulp plugins that we install are added to our package.json. We do that with the save dev flag. Now, this might take a year and a half, so I'm going to go ahead and pause for you guys. And at least on my machine, I got a couple non-critical errors, so I don't really care about that. Let's go ahead and pop open Visual Studio Code. I am going to go ahead and delete this npm debug.log. I also have some good news that actually happened very, very recently, maybe a couple days ago. Visual Studio Code, a new version came out. Bad news is there's some syntax highlighting bugs. Good news is that ES6, or rather ES 2015, is now the default, so I no longer have to create that nasty JS config file all the time. So that's super exciting. All right, let's just go ahead and get all the grunt work out of the way here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new file. I'm going to call it gulp file. Oops, that's not how you spell gulp. Wow, I can't type tonight at all. There we go. Finally got it. Third try. Fourth try, maybe. Let's go ahead and just put a standard gulp file together. So I'm going to go ahead and require in gulp. I'm also going to do require gulp load plugins. Always make sure to execute this. You already saw me make that mistake. And I'm just going to create a really, really simple scripts and styles task. So gulp task dev scripts. And we'll go ahead and do that. And then we're simply going to return gulp.source. We're going to put our scripts in src scripts. And then I'll just put in a JS blob to grab everything out of that. Then we're going to pipe into Babel, and then we're going to pipe into gulp dest, and we're going to dump out, like we have been, into public scripts. So then we need our gulp task dev styles. And for here, I'm going to go ahead and return gulp.source and do source styles. I'm going to define one less file, and it's going to be site.less. And then I'm going to pipe that into moneyless. Still like saying that. And then we're going to pipe that into gulp dest public styles. Not worrying about source maps or auto prefix or anything like that. Don't really care. Then I'm going to do gulp task dev, which is simply going to do gulp.parallel, passing in dev scripts and dev styles. Then I'm going to do gulp task watch. Gulp task watch is going to do gulp.serial. And gulp.serial is first going to invoke dev, and then it's going to invoke an anonymous function. And that function is simply going to do gulp watch on source styles any less file in this directory. And when we execute that, we're going to then do gulp series on dev, or whoops, gulp series on dev styles. And then we're going to copy and paste that and do a scripts watch. And we'll do a glob on JS. Really standard gulp file. I encourage people to follow along. I encourage people to really instill this syntax into their muscle memory. And you can only really do that through practice. So apologies for redoing something that looks similar to what we've done before. But again, I really encourage the practice. Anyway, let's go ahead and create our folders. We're going to have a public folder, and he's going to have a scripts folder and a styles folder. Then we're going, as a sibling of public, we're going to have a source folder, and source is also going to have a scripts and a styles. Now let's go ahead and we have our folder structure done, we have our gulp file done, so now let's start creating files. And we'll start at the root. So we need a file at the root, and that's going to be our babelrc. So never forget the babelrc, because we need to, in this case, after I change my language mode to JSON, we need to go ahead and do a presets array of ES 2015, so we get all those awesome transforms. Otherwise, Babel will do nothing. So always make sure you have your babelrc. Alternatively, you could have passed in that parameter into the Babel Gulp plugin, but I prefer using the babelrc in this case. Okay, so files. Let's go ahead and create our style. So I'm going to create site.less. And he's just going to do, for now, he's just going to be HTML body margin 0 padding 0. Just some stuff to make sure that our transforms are working. And then in scripts, I'll just do an application JS. And again, just to make sure our stuff is working, I'll do const woe equals hey console log woe. Now that we're done with that, let's go into public and let's create our HTML file. So I'm going to create a index.html. We'll start off with a doc type HTML, and we'll do our head, our HTML head plus body. For our head, let's go ahead and throw in a title of sample app, and then we'll want to import our style sheet. So we'll do a link of rel style sheet, which with an href of styles site.less. And then for our body, the only HTML we're going to have now is a div with an ID of mount. So go ahead and do that, and we'll just put this in loading. The idea is once we get going and start writing the application, we're going to load in our code into this little mount div. All right, so we're ready to test it. So I'm going to hop over to my command line window, and I guess the first thing is let's go ahead and make sure that our dev task works. So I'm going to go ahead and type in gulp dev, and we get an error because I misspelled serial. Dev. Oh, series. No, sorry. I didn't mean to type in serial earlier. Still getting used to Gulp 4, so I guess it's good practice for me too. Anyway, our stuff completed, and if I pop over into public, we have our application.js. It was transformed, and our site.css, and indeed we also have that being transformed as well. So let's go ahead and test our watching. I'm going to do gulp dev watch, and task never defined because I called it watch, another small mistake. And now that I have that going, it is watching, hopefully. So let's go into site.css, and let's just do background is red. And that procced, so we won't worry, we'll delete that thing, and then come here to application.js, change this to 1, 2, 3, and then scripts procced as well. So we are all set. The skeleton of our application is done. So yeah, basically this was just a big review of Gulp, so I encourage people to go ahead and do that, get that committed to muscle memory, at least better than me since, I messed up a couple times, but that's okay. Alright, I think I'm going to go ahead and end this video here, and then in the next video what we're going to do is we are going to be talking about the module loading syntax, and we'll see you then.